This séance was recorded on April the 6th, 1972, medium Leslie Flint.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Who's missing?
Nobody's missing.
You better have a roll call.
Nobody's missing.
Nicholas. What makes you say that, Nick?
See that?
It's a threat that we can use. Pick up or sing our song.
Mickey. Oh, Mickey, don't go there again. Do you want us to sing that our song, Mickey? No? That's it. Shall we sing? Mickey singing.
And when the white notes fall on my ear, discord and strife shall disappear. Silently now we wait for thee, ready, my God, thy will to see. Open my eyes, illumine me, Spirit divine. Helping you out, Nigel?
Yes.
What's the next bit, Nigel?
Open
my ears
Yes,
that I may hear
Voices of truth, serene and clear. And when the wave notes
fall on my ear, discord and strife shall disappear. Silently now we wait.
you wait for me.
We'll wait for you, Maggie.
Wow, that's a case of having to, isn't it? Cheer up, everybody.
I'm well cheered.
I thought there seemed to be a hair of depression.
Oh, no. No.
With
Well,
you
one or
around.
two people got hair of depression. They're going a bit bald.
Thank you. It's the cat that's wearing it.
Might be blackface.
Oh no, Mickey. Don't you know something I can do?
You could wear one of them little skull caps, wouldn't you?
Well, I'm not Yiddish.
Well, it makes no odds. You might do a bit better if people thought you were.
Oh. Mm. Hadn't thought of
No racial prejudice.
that. After all, we're all the same under the skin, aren't we?
I wouldn't say that altogether, but I think most people are fundamentally well-meaning.
Mm.
Oh well, we won't get on to all that dark.
Why not? No.
How are you, Murray?
I'm much better,
You're in the
thank you.
pink.
Yeah.
That's better than being in the red, ain't it?
Yeah.
You are in red.
Yes.
Red sails in the sunset. You remember that one?
Yes.
Not that you look like an old barge, I don't know how. You mustn't cheer you lot up. You're having the dumps.
Were you around then when that was popular?
Oh well, I was over here, but I heard old Gracie and all that lot
So is
from
that
this
Karen?
side, you know. I mean, I keep up with the times, you know.
Oh, that's a bit old now.
And I'm ever so pleased you're better now, Marley.
Yes, thank you, Mickey.
How's your new car, girl?
Fine, thank you.
Good.
Hmm?
You want to ask me something,
Oh, don't talk rush.
No, no, share at once, will you? Get trod on in a rush. What about you asking me something then? Smoking pipe, Willie.
Me?
Yeah, why not? What's wrong with you asking something?
Don't have anything people want to ask? The moment.
What about your mate?
Oh, there is one thing.
What?
Do you remember when we sat the other day? When
Just
we-
a two on you?
Yes.
What about it?
Well, somebody came through and started to talk, and then went away. Not the Dorothy lady, the other, the male voice. Have you any idea who that was?
Oh, Christ. I haven't a clue now, mate.
No, one of mine.
I don't keep a check on them, you know.
No.
And unless it was someone I know well, I wouldn't remember.
No.
Probably somebody that had been brought in or attracted, like.
Yeah.
Why? Was it someone you thought you might have known?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Could
sorry.
have been my dad.
Oh, it could have been maybe, but I don't think so, because I'd recognise him. Because I've seen him here a few times.
I haven't.
Oh, of course you haven't. You're not over here, are you? You're not clairvoyant. Never mind. Don't be depressed about it. It'll all come in the wash, won't it?
Yes.
What about your little mate?
I've got no problems with him.
Didn't ask you about problems, I asked you got a question. You have, you've got a big problem.
Well, I've got a big problem, yes, which will sort itself out.
Sitting beside you.
Well, it'll sort itself out.
What a way to speak about Gwen.
That'll be the day, won't it? What about you then, Gwen?
Well, I don't think I have any problems at the
What
moment.
about
I just like
you?
to-
What about you, Nigel?
Let's think. Would you say there's anything in this subject that could be used to help drug addicts or not? Or do you think it's there is no
Well, that's a
connection?
corking question, isn't it? You mean in us
Well, it's a
communicating-
growing problem in the world, drug addiction. Would you say that teachings of spirit could be helpful or not?
Well, I don't know. I would say yes, we could help them, but how are we going to reach them? I mean, it's true we can reach them in a sense, individually and mentally, but quite frankly, quite often when they're under the influence, sometimes they are in touch.
Yes.
But they're not necessarily in touch with the old spirits, and sometimes perhaps it could be even more dangerous and do more harm than good. I think like everything else, all this business of communication and that, it must be on the right level of consciousness, and it must be under certain conditions when the influences are good. It's like everything else, it can be abused. I suppose drugs in certain directions, under certain conditions, are not as bad as some people might think. I think it's when they're used indiscriminately. And I don't know whether we can help them. I would say yes, we can help them, of course. But it'd be better if they could be helped when they're under normal conditions rather than under an influence where they themselves, quite unconsciously possibly, could be drawn and attracted to the entities who are not very advanced, which would complicate us from getting in touch or helping them, because we'd not only have to try and help them, but we'd also have to combat the influences around them. In other words, we can help them, and there are lots of people who do go and help them, but of course the whole thing is that this whole subject and all the rest of it, must be held under reasonable conditions, at least where there is sincerity of purpose, and where people are harmoniously gathered together for the upliftment of themselves mentally and spiritually. Unless you approach this in the right sense, then the whole thing, well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily always dangerous, but I think that one has to be aware of the fact that you can draw and attract unsavoury spirits and people who frankly will drag you down, who are earthbound and who may be glad to use you, even if it's only temporarily, even like these people who are taking drugs, and then they do and act and say things which under the normal influence they wouldn't. In other words, they lose their own identity, and before you know where you are, some of these people are being taken over and their own self is outside instead of inside. I think that there are many, aspects, as you say, and it will take a long time and someone wiser than me to discuss it with you. But it's got many sort of different ways of thinking about and approaching any.
Do you think because these people that take drugs is because they cannot face up to themselves? They cannot live
Not
with themselves?
necessarily, no, I don't think it starts off like that. I think it is that it's just, something to do. I mean, other people do it, well, let's have a go, see what it's all about. And they get caught up on it. I don't think the majority of them really intend to get caught up on it. I think they just, enter into something, or a party, or wherever it may be, and then they find they get hooked on it, as you call it, I think that drugs, certain drugs, from what I understand, if they're used in the proper way, can be a help to mankind, and obviously are. But it's like everything else, if it's abused and used in the wrong way, and in an ignorant, stupid kind of way, it can be a very dangerous thing. And after all, a drug does, to some extent, what is the word? It sort of,
Escapist.
well, it is escapist, isn't it? I mean, it's running away from self.
Yes.
You see, a lot of people think that they're tuning in, or they're opening up the self to a wider experience. But that's not the way to do it. One can do this without the aid of drugs. Drugs are really hallucinatory, as you call it, in some cases anyway. And I think the whole thing is you cannot run away from yourself until you face up to yourself and analyse and dissect yourself and try to find out what is wrong with yourself and then try to do something about yourself. In other words, you've got to start from the bottom and work your way up. It's no good trying to call up the spirits or call up higher intelligences and try to enter into the silence, and in other words, enter into the spiritual, until to some extent you've prepared the ground with yourself. In other words, you've got to open up yourself, but you've also got to some extent, be analytical and critical of yourself and try to throw out from yourself certain aspects of self which are barriers. In other words, you've got to start with yourself before you can find your true self, and then you begin to find your true self, and then you're helped and aided by entities and souls from this side on higher rates and vibrations who will come down and work with you and harmonise and lift you out, as it were, completely, in a sense almost, of the material. But you can only do this one way, by hard work and facing truth. And the first aspect of truth is yourself. Find out the truth about yourself, and then you'll open up the key, get the key to open up a lot of the other doors that are closed. But you must start with self first, because you can't do it through drugs.
But I think lots of young people imagine that this is the only life, as it were, and it is so dreary for them in some cases, perhaps.
I think this is stupid.
Don't you
I don't
think
even think it's an argument.
No?
There may be isolated instances of individuals who are very weak, or perhaps it is that they, within themselves, are very insecure, or perhaps they come from a background or condition of life which has made them insecure. One must try to dig down and find the roots of things. I mean, it's easy to blame the young. I mean, I don't blame no one, of course, but I think in some instances there are reasons and excuses to be made, and one may feel desperately sorry for them. But there must come a time, sooner or later, when they must look in the mirror and analyse themselves and see themselves for what they really are. The only way is to overcome yourself. In fact, the only way to make any progress, particularly spiritual progress, is to overcome self. You've got to get down to rock bottom. It's no good depending on this prop or that prop to help you over or tide you over, or go here or go there and try to forget. It's the same as a person who takes to drink. That doesn't do any good. It weakens him mentally, physically, and psychically and spiritually. In other words, you've no good running for props to prop yourself up. You've got to learn what you have within yourself, and everyone has this within themselves, the power to overcome and the power to achieve. And if people will only realise this, I know there are some people who are very sad cases, and it's only right that other people should help them, and it's only right that occasionally you should prop someone up. But if you're going to keep on propping them up, or they're going to be propped up by drugs or whatever, then they're going to obviously get worse. There must come a time when every human being must face up to himself and fend for himself and fight for himself. Anyway, what about you, Daff?
Oh, I'm all right, thank you, Mickey.
Mickey, one time, a long time ago, you said you...
You're out of turn, you know, mate. You're going all around. Anyway, I'll take your question.
I didn't push myself forward, no.
That's all right, don't take notes of me. What do you want, girl?
Well, you did say once you'd tell us all, tell us about the people that help us on the other side. Remember?
Yeah, I probably did, I forget.
Oh, would you?
Well, yes, but not tonight.
Oh, all right.
If you don't mind, dear.
No.
So
I know what he's going to ask, I think.
So is he.
Kenny. How are you, Ken? What do you want to ask?
Well, can you see people's guides round us here?
Oh, yes, I know most of them.
Do you?
You do it.
Oh, yes, of course I do. I would be a poor do if I didn't know who was who and what was what and who came and who didn't among the regulars.
Well, could we at some time?
Yes, sometime, please.
Yes. Have
What
we
about you
candle?
then, Blondie?
Who's blonde?
Me.
I'd like to ask how my girlfriend is with you.
According to your mama, who's always present,
Yeah.
she's getting on very well.
She is.
And in due course, I'm told she will make contact with you.
Well, that's what I've been feeling very strongly, that she probably
And
wants...
she has been around in your house.
Well, that's all right, because, you know, perhaps you'll let me know when she's ready to...
Yes.
Thank you.
That's all right, love.
Give
That's
Mum
your
my
job.
love.
Of course, yeah, you bet. Yeah, Mari, what do you want now, girl?
Oh.
Don't ask me nothing, anything. Come on, Mari, you're slipping, ain't you, for a nurse? A nurse, yeah. They're usually on the mark, aren't they?
Yes, I didn't think I was going to be asked. You spoke
Why
to me
not,
already.
It doesn't have to be a material question, I hope.
Oh, no.
It can be anything that's helpful. I feel
Do you know
chatty
who my
tonight.
guides are?
I don't mean chatty scratchy, but chatty.
Do you know who my guides are?
Yes, I do. But when they want to reveal themselves to you, that is up to them. You see, that's one thing I feel it's... you see, this is that aspect which you don't realise. Sit still. They say that it's better for them to reveal themselves when they wish to reveal themselves, or convey what they wish to convey of themselves. Of course I know lots of the souls and people that come here regulars who stand in the background and who, no doubt when they feel disposed or the right moment, will come forward and say, well, I'm so-and-so or so-and-so. I know all of them. Now the Duchess.
No, not.
The Duchess of Stone Square.
Oh, Mickey.
I'm only teasing you, love.
Some Duchess. Well, darling Mickey, I don't think I've got anything to ask you.
Nothing at all.
No, I don't think so.
Isn't it strange?
I've got another question to ask you.
Ah, now perhaps we're getting on to the $1 million one. What is your question?
Well, you were saying, Mickey, that everyone had to start with themselves. Didn't you? Tonight, or...
That's true.
Well, give us a clue how to start, please.
Well, I think the answer to that one is so simple, and I'm rather surprised with all due respect you asked it.
But I want to hear it from you.
All right now. Well, look, any human being, doesn't matter who it is, whether they're interested in this subject or whether they're religious or non-religious or whatever, any human being who realises that he wants to advance, and I don't necessarily mean materially, obviously, but also in a sense also materially, because if you start putting your house in order, and that is yourself, and you start delving into your innermost self, and you see yourself as you really are, and the person can. Some people say that no one can see themselves as they really are. I don't believe that, because nobody knows a person better than the person themselves. They know why they say certain things or do certain things or act in a peculiar way or whatever. And they should be able to ferret out within themselves all the little idiosyncrasies and peculiarities and all the irritating factors within their innermost self, all their little good qualities and their bad points, and they should be able to say, well, this is something I ought to do differently. I ought to eradicate this weakness within myself, this stupidity or whatever it may be. In other words, I think until you yourself come to terms with yourself and try to extend yourself, and I'm talking here about the innermost self of the human person, that is the spiritual aspect, the spiritual being, and then you say, well, if I want to really progress and I want to really achieve in a true sense, a lasting sense, then I must try to overcome this weakness or that weakness. I must try to do this or to do that. In other words, although you may not succeed, the mere fact that you are having a good old turn out, as it were, this in itself clears the way. It opens up the possibility of advancement. And in consequence, you yourself become more happy within yourself, more conscious of the fact that you have achieved something within yourself. And this is immediately, more or less, shown to other people who know you well, and they say, what's happened to her or him? He's different, you know, he doesn't seem so, whatever it is, caustic with his tongue or whatever, you know. In other words, you begin to change, and as you change, so you expand your auric emanation and make it possible for entities, not only entities, I would tell you, but thought forces and influences from our worlds to enter into your being, and you become rejuvenated, you become physically, mentally, psychically and spiritually aware and rejuvenated, and this should start with yourself. This is a problem with a lot of people that go into religions and heaven knows what else. It's often a surface thing. It doesn't really sink very deep, and sometimes when it appears to with some people, it doesn't really have any real effect because it's not rooted, it's got no real basis. You can't build on rock, you can't build on shifting sands. You've got to have a good ground to plant the seed. And within every human being there is that part of themselves that is good ground. And it is this ground you must nurture, and it is in this ground you must plant the seeds which will develop and evolve so that you yourself will be absolutely in time amazed at the tremendous change that's taken place. I know there are some people who say they've had a religious experience and it's changed them. Well, this is true, in many cases, very true, no doubt. But it doesn't alter the fact that it still means that you yourself have got to do the spade work. No one can do it for you. We were talking earlier about drugs and heaven knows what else and all that. Well, it's all very well to turn around and give a helping hand. This is part of evolution and development of the human spirit, that one should always forget self in endeavouring to help others. And this is truly the way. Because when I talk about digging deep within yourself, I don't mean that you do it from a selfish motive or a selfish point of view or thinking of self. You do it because you want yourself, within yourself, to be able to achieve so that you can give yourself in love and service and harmony to help other people. And you can do this and you will do this, but you must also learn that to help others, you must also not just prop them up, but you must also prop yourself up in a sense. I know this sounds a bit odd, but what I'm trying to say is that when you give from yourself, you are giving something that is living, that is real, that's vital, that's something that is so strong, stronger than even you know of its power. And it's taking something out of you, but at the same time, you will be given an inner strength and an inner awareness, and you will be strengthened by a power which is beyond your comprehension. When you give out, it's like a boomerang, it comes back. You never lose by giving, and I'm talking here not always of actions, but I'm also talking to some extent of giving from within yourself with the power of the Spirit within you. If you can do it, and it's necessary often to do things by action, by deed. This, by its very nature, must bring, not that you think in the first instance or at any moment of reward, never think of what it's going to do for you. What is it going to do for someone else is important. I mean, Christ and all the great teachers and prophets, they all taught these things. They all realised these in the truths, that within man is the power to overcome all things. But before you can overcome anything, you've got to overcome yourself. You've got to overcome the weaknesses and the stupidities within yourself. You've got to see things in their right perspective. You've got to realise what is of value and what is not. You've got to realise that the things of the mind and the spirit are the only lasting things. The rest is insignificant. It's no good you concentrating all the time on acquiring this or acquiring that or achieving this. To some extent it may be justified, but it's not the be-all and the end-all. It's not this in itself that will give you happiness or a real joy, and it certainly won't have any effect whatsoever in regard to your evolution as a spiritual being, or a human being for that matter. The point is that you've got to learn to see things in their true perspective, and to give out from yourself those things which, by their very nature, will transform others and the world in which you live, and in consequence of doing that will help to transform you too. The whole point about this business, whatever you like to call it, or whatever aspect you might like to put it under, or with, whether it's a religious organisation or group, or whether it's a philosophical one, or whatever it may be, it still boils down to the simple truth of man, know thyself. And when you know yourself, as far as it's possible to know yourself while yet in the human frame, you'll begin to change not only yourself but others around you and the world in which you live. Man has not learnt the secret. There are a few people here and there who have learnt the secret. And it's true, quite often they go by the wall and the world walks over them. All right, they did to Christ, they did to all the great teachers. But this is the thing that matters. It is the impact, though it may not necessarily be at the moment of time in which you exist. The impact is there. The good remains, and it lives. It doesn't die. The only thing that lives in history that really has any beneficial power, the only thing that really matters, is not the great men of science or letters or generals or what have you. When you get down to basic truths, when it comes to man's eternal spirit and eternal welfare, you get to people like the Christ and so on. These are the people who made the great contribution. The people who live by the Spirit. These are the ones who will save the world. Although it may seem an impossible thing, we still have faith and realise, because we know it's the only tangible thing, the reality of the Spirit, which cannot be destroyed. Whereas all else fails, all else falls by the wayside. I mean, you may erect great buildings, you may have achieved great things in many respects, but they only last for a time. Soon they are in ruins, and they cease to matter. They are things that you talk about in the dim distant past, and they may be interesting and fascinating, but they have no real bearing, they have no real power. The only lasting things are the things of the Spirit, which come from within man himself. And these are the things that matter, and these are the things you should concern yourself with while on earth. And the rest will follow after.
Can you suggest anything any of us can do to, apart from examining ourselves, to help other people?
Well, most people, and what is that parable about take the mote out of thine own eye before, you see, this is so true. I mean, it's so easy to stand up and condemn someone, or to say, oh, look at her, and whatever, No, I'm not saying you do, I'm doing this for posterity. No, seriously. What I mean is that I know it's not easy to go through life and not make comment or pass remarks. And sometimes they're justifiable, and I think they're essential, because you just cannot condone stupidity, you cannot condone cruelty and so on. And there are times when one must stand firm, but one must try to see life in a fuller sense. No one is perfect, everyone is well, everyone is imperfect, everyone's making mistakes. Everyone is seeing the mote in the other person's eye, not their own. It seems to me, you have got to be more charitable, you have got to be more kindly disposed, you've got to sometimes give in when you feel like standing up and fighting. You see, Christ, you see, we smack the face one side, and then some people say, oh, I wouldn't allow that, but the point is that you've got to sometimes take defeat, you've got to be humiliated, sometimes you've got to be terribly hurt. And until these things happen, I don't think that really you can see the point of the purpose and the meaning of reality of spirit. In other words, you've got to say to yourself, what matters is not what the other man does in that sense, it's what I do, my reaction. If I can help that person to change and to be a different person and to think and act differently, if I can just make some little difference, that is a step in the right direction. And in the process you're changing yourself. The more good you do, the more you yourself help yourself to change and to become a better person. You know, it's to me all so simple.
Do you think, Mickey, that it is necessary to suffer? I know it's an old...
Oh, I think it depends on what one means by suffering. There are many kinds of suffering, we know that. Physical suffering, mental suffering, and all many forms. But I don't think that it's possible to evolve or to develop without suffering of one kind or another. I think it's completely impossible, particularly since you are in an imperfect world, and in a world where, well, you just couldn't possibly do the things of the spirit in the fullest sense, that is, without suffering. And if you're even quite a decent human being, without any realization of spiritual truth, and if you just feel you want to do the best, and you try to do the best, and you look around you in the world, and you see the way the world is, and the sufferings in the world, you feel inadequate, and you feel, well, you know, what can one do? But the point is that you have just got to fight, and you've got to suffer. You can't avoid these things. I don't see how any human being can avoid suffering of some nature or kind of another, even in the most happy surroundings, where people are cosseted, as you say, you know, where everything's going beautifully, they've got no real headaches or worries. There is suffering of a kind, or should be.
Mickey, did you know anything about this?
If you have many of the world's goods, and you have no headaches of any real description, no, you know, problems, and you have all you need, you're happy, all right. But how can you really be happy when you see the sufferings of others? You must feel too, otherwise you haven't advanced.
I was going to say, did you know anything about this subject of psychic freedom before you passed?
No, nothing.
You didn't? So you've learned this all. What made you do this work?
Well, I just wandered in, as it were. I got sort of caught up with a group who were coming to a meeting, and I sort of got interested, and I felt I'd like just try and help.
Well, do you have to sort of ask permission to become...
Well, you just can't take it on your own shoulders. You've got to get some sort of law and order about it, and you've got to be, well, you're sort of trained to some extent, you know, and, well, I mean, I suppose it is difficult to explain, but I didn't suddenly take over, you know, it was all several years for I sort of, if you can put it like that, take over.
But then, did you have to go to some sort of, I use the word authority?
Yes, in a kind of way, but this is one of those peculiar things you never know how to answer, because you have to bring it down to material basis. You talk about going to someone in authority. Well, it's I know what you mean, but I know what I'm trying to put is this, that over here there is no one in authority. This may sound daft, but it's as if everybody fits in their own particular little sphere or niche, call it what you like. Nobody sort of is in authority as such. Everyone is there to help. Everyone is there to uplift, to guide, and to counsel you, and, as you put it, But no one says do this or do that, you have to do this. No one is there to drive you in any direction. And you see, what it all boils down to what I was telling you earlier on. It's within yourself. When the desire from within yourself comes to do something that is worthwhile, or to achieve something that is good by its very nature, when it comes from within yourself, this tremendous surging of the spirit to uplift and to uplift others and to be of service, then automatically you raise yourself on a level of consciousness to someone of a higher order who will mentally, not necessarily verbally, transmit to you information or give you the go-ahead, if you like, or give you the inspiration to achieve even further. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that everything here is perfect harmony. Everything here is what you would call law and order, but it's not a law and order that is set up where there are rules and regulations, where they're enforced by strength or will. Everything here is achieved by love and by the aspiring of the human spirit for a higher realization of truth and to do that which is good. In other words, we evolve by our own effort or desiring, but we also take upon ourselves as we do this, or think of this, the achievements of others. Now this sounds odd, but another man's achievements is freely given in experience to another less fortunate. Here there is a complete giving of goodness, a complete giving of love, a complete giving of harmony and well-being and knowledge and experience. And when you know within yourself, as one does, that you are ready for a certain work, or whatever it may be, you don't have to be told. Automatically it happens. You see, everything here fits in perfection. I don't know that I should say that our world is perfect, but in every aspect, and I put it like that, of every aspect of the world or life here, there is a form or a kind of consciousness or awareness of perfection within certain limits, I suppose, according to the experience and the knowledge and the aspiration of the individuals that live in that particular environment. But there is no one who comes and says, you must do this, or you must decide that you have to do this. People will come to you, but it's as if something from them enters into you, and you are in harmony. And from this harmony you have knowledge, and from this knowledge you have experience, and from this experience you are given directive. I don't know how else I can put it. It's true that we have great halls of learning. It's true that we have great places where one may listen to great music. Thank you. And it's, you know, the point is that everything that happens to every soul here is right and natural. When I say it's right and it's right and it's natural for that person at that point, if you like, in their evolution. For instance, I can look down on certain spheres or enter into certain spheres where people live a life which to them is very real, just as real as yours. And I wouldn't want to be in that environment. I'd feel very uncomfortable, I'd be very unhappy, but because it's not my condition. But for those people who are living in that world of their own mental creation, to which they have become, as it were, naturally and normally adjusted, they're quite happy in their limited kind of way, until they begin to start from within themselves, as it all goes back to the beginning, to realise that they ought to be doing something, they ought to be thinking differently, and in consequence acting differently, and also trying to sort of throw out from themselves certain things that their consciousness is now becoming aware are not good or not right. In other words, it all boils down to the individual. What sphere or what condition or what state of mind or what state of being you find yourself. a lot of people when they first come here are in a very peculiar state because they are not exactly, you might say, out of the body. They're out of the body in the sense that their body is no longer functioning, physical body, but their thoughts and their mentality is still of the body, is still of the material, and they're in a kind of an astral state where they're thinking very much on the same lines, and therefore they are in a kind of mental world which is neither material, neither is it in the sense, or certainly isn't spiritual. It's etheric, or it's psychic, if you like, or it's a world of illusion. And they have to get out of this world of illusion. Everyone, more or less, certainly in your world, is living in a world of illusion anyway. Yours is the biggest illusion of the lot. You think it's the most solid and real and material, and the vast majority of people think it's the only world. They don't even think or know about another world, not concerned with it. They think your world is the be-all and the end-all. It isn't. It's only the cradle. It's only the womb in which you are born. It's not the reality. You've got to find the reality out of your illusion. But, you know, I can't go into all this in detail, but it'd take too long. But there are so many different aspects to it. But until you get right with yourself, within yourself, the kingdom of God is within. And so it is. You're already living in that kingdom, in a sense. But you haven't found it. And once you start to find it, then you begin to understand it, and begin to grow with it, and expand and understand many things that at the moment are hidden. All these things are not new. All the great teachers, the great prophets, they all knew of these things. And that is why there are those great souls who still come back to earth, because they're still trying desperately to find people who can be used as instruments to give out this great truth that man might save himself from himself. But you must first find yourself. And this is the most important thing of all, which very few people even bother about.
There are a certain amount of spheres already on this plane, isn't there? When you look around and see environments of people's conditions.
Well, what you really mean is there are many aspects of the same existence.
Yes. Well,
according to background and according to nation, according to culture or lack of it. In fact, there are many aspects in your world of the same human race. I mean, but it doesn't alter the fact that you are all spirits while yet in the body, all born under, living under different circumstances and conditions or different backgrounds, which to some people, I suppose in a kind of way, would suggest that it's an unfair world. Well, it is an unfair world in a sense, but the greater the triumph, if I can use such a word, and we don't think of the things as a triumph, is to overcome. It's sometimes, you know, it's much easier for a poor man with everything in the world against him to overcome than it is for a very rich man. Remember the story about the camel and the eye of a needle. I mean, this is what you have to remember, that it's not necessarily always the circumstances of birth or the background or what nation you were born into or what schooling you had or didn't have. Goodness and the power of the Holy Spirit can rise above all the vicissitudes of life. Sometimes a great man will evolve or develop from the most humble of circumstances where everything has been against him, illness, disease, poverty, and yet from that will come often a great soul who will make a mark in your world for good. I mean, this is so true. People always think, oh, why was I born under that condition or circumstance? Why was I not born? Why didn't I have the opportunities of my neighbour? And so on. But the more money you have, the more of the so-called attributes of materialism you have, the greater your responsibilities, and often the greater your temptations, and sometimes the greater the barrier they are to spiritual progression. I'm told numbers of people arrive here daily who materially were highly successful and often very prominent in that field of activity, And the world, to some extent, or at least some aspects of the world, or peoples, thought they were remarkably clever men and brilliant men and successful men. But their problems when they arrive here are often a darn sight worse than somebody who was born in a slum. You can't judge. In any case, I should never judge at all. It's very wrong to judge anyone. But what you've got to get into your system is that within yourself is an invincible spirit that is indestructible, that is part of the greater world of reality, of which there is no beginning and no end, which is divine. And this part of you is the only part that really matters. But you can use your physical body, you can use your physical attributes or powers, whatever they may be, to give the world some realization of the reality of these things of which I speak, the power of the spirit. Great musicians in their composition have given a glimpse of the beauties of the spiritual spheres. Great poets have written poems which in themselves, by word, suggesting thought, give a thought and an impression which is of the reality of life eternal. Great artists have created great paintings, or great sculptors have made beautiful statues and things. All these things have a spiritual basis and significance, and I can assure you that the only things that you will find here in the more elevated, if I can use that word, spheres of existence are the things that have been created by the human spirit on the highest possible level. The consciousness of the things of the spirit, the realities which overcome the baser and the physical aspects of life. The only things that matter are the things that are created in love and in the power of the Holy Spirit, and the reality of the power of this Spirit expressing itself in all manner and form of human thought and action. The baser things, the lesser things, the material things, the worthless things disappear. They crumble like they just crumble like the weakness that is in the walls of a great castle that once was magnificent to look at and which was considered a very valuable property. But the castle in itself is of no consequence, and the foundations are weak. What exists, what stands the test of time, of all time, are the good things, where the bricks that have been laid, where the creation has been brought into being on a firm foundation. And this firm foundation is of the spirit of man, which is indestructible, on the highest possible level of spiritual consciousness. The only structures that matter are the structures that man creates from within himself, made by the bricks of goodness. I mean, these things it's very difficult to put into words, but once you get the realization that the things that matter are not what seem to be the obvious things, but the less obvious, and the things that really are important are the things that are lasting, the things by their very nature that will bring real happiness and joy to the human spirit, irrespective of time or place or age. These things are the real things, as you are, as you really are, deep down inside you. And therefore, as you see yourself and desire to expand and grow, you cast away all the worse of self and leave only that which is good, and then from all that will blossom forth the realities of truth. I don't know, it's impossible to put into words. I just feel that each one of you realise these things, and I hope to some extent you struggle to do something about it. But you cannot progress until you put your own house in order. If you put your house in order, then, well, it's amazing what revelation comes to you, and how different you yourself will feel, and how happier you'll be. Even though you may not have a big bank balance, somehow you will manage, but your happiness will be not in the material things so much, but in the things that are lasting and real. And, quite frankly, if I bring it down to a different level, It's an amazing thing how if you do give yourself truly in love, in a true spiritual sense, to others, and to do the work of the Spirit, the rest will follow after. You'll find that you won't lack, that you'll be looked after, you'll be guided, you'll be helped. The same with old Flint. I mean, we've helped him over years. We kept him going, we've looked after him mentally, physically, and we've done everything in our power to make things as easy as possible. Of course, we're not magicians, we can't do everything, and of course he doesn't always, perhaps sometimes anyway, doesn't always fall in as we'd like him to with what we would wish. But at least I think he has on the whole made struggles and overcome to some extent, but he's still got his faults, who hasn't? No one will ever be perfect in your world, and what is perfection? But the point is, what I'm trying to say is that if you play ball with us, we'll play ball with you. But you've also got to do something about it. Expect us to do the bloody lot.
Mickey, you're wonderful.
No, I'm not. I mean,
Yes,
old Flint's worrying about his health. But there again, although there's nothing radically, seriously, organically wrong, as far as I'm given to understand, he's a stupid clot. He ought to lose a couple of stone. If he used to go on a jolly good diet and get some of that fat down, he'd feel a different person, and also it wouldn't put such a strain on his heart, and he wouldn't get the bad turns he has. He's within himself. You see, this is what people don't realise. You can't stuff yourself and do stupid things without, in some way or other, nature taking its natural course. I know there are people who are born and grow up and they're sick, and that's the sins of the fathers fall on the children, which I suppose to some extent doesn't sound square and fair. But this is again something that people don't fully realise, that you cannot escape from yourself, and you cannot escape either from the past. You see, people always think of themselves as an individual, which in a sense is true, no one denies that. But the point is that you are the product of other people's minds and bodies, thoughts and actions, and what comes into your world is a product of the past, of other people's thoughts and actions and so on. So therefore, automatically, you're taking on something from the past. And if the thoughts were wrong in the past, and if the actions weren't what they might have been, to some extent it may seem unfair, but it's only nature in this sense, apart from other things, asserting itself. It's not as crazy as it seems. You are the product of other people's minds. In a sense, there's no such thing as an individual. You are an individual. You become a personality, you become a character, but you're the product of other people's thoughts and actions. And you have to then start to develop and evolve yourself, so that you become, as it were, the creative. And this is the whole secret. I think that one has to be creative, and you have to be creative to develop yourself as a spiritual being. And this is vitally important, but you must also remember that the power of the Spirit is fluidic, that it flows through all life. It flows through human beings, it flows through nature and animals and trees and birds and so on. Everything about your world has also a spiritual implication, and it has a fluidic power of spirit which is indestructible. Nothing is really lost. It may take on different shape or different form or a different aspect, but the fundamental truth and reality of the power of the Spirit is still functioning in some other way or shape or form, and still has life eternal. Nothing is lost. It merely grows and expands and becomes more evolved. And when people say about, oh, I think it's wicked that so-and-so should have this terrible infliction, whatever it is, and why should these people have a child with, or whatever. I mean, you take those poor children who are born without any arms and legs. That was an interference with nature. That was something diabolical that man had brought into being by his stupidity. And in consequence, those children are born under great, and will be under great disadvantage and disability. But who can say that in spite of that, that that child may not become a better human being at a later point in time. I'm not saying that is an answer, but what I'm trying to say is that we have got to learn to overcome the body. Christ taught it, all the great teachers and prophets and seers taught it, and until you can learn to overcome the worser part of self, the material part of self, seeing the material body and the material world for what it is, merely the basis, the clay, the potter's clay from which is formed the beautiful object or objects or the beautiful creation. Try to see yourselves as you truly are, and the rest will be unfolded in time. Now I've said my piece, and good night, bye-bye. And get your weight down, Flint. Two-ton Tessie.
Two-ton Tessie.
No, seriously, jokes apart. If he lost a bit of weight, he'd feel 100% better.
Right.
I know you've got to get on a strict diet. No bread, no potatoes, none of them there rock cakes. Anyway, why worry? You can have them tonight, start fresh tomorrow.
Oh dear.
But Leslie, darling, it is good advice.
What?
It is good
Oh, it's
advice.
of course it's good advice.